All yours, Luke.
Fantastic. Hello, everybody. It's Wednesday, October 21st. Thank you so much for your time. We value it immensely. This is our BP meeting. I forget whatever number it is, but we're going to be talking over a couple different things, including the co-op incentive model that I'm very excited about. That'll be towards the end. We're going to be talking about, Eric's going to be talking about the October and November releases we have coming up, and then the BP fee setting as well. That's another topic. And then hopefully we can have a little bit of time left over for discussion. Mostly probably going to be discussing the co-op model, incentive model, because it is a pretty significant change to tokenomics. We talked about it in the past, but we've got it kind of streamlined a little bit more. So I want to extend that conversation further, and we'll go from there. So if you want to take it away, Eric, go ahead.
Yep. I'm going to try and share, but I got to keep an eye on that waiting room as well here. So let me do both those. Let me pull up the participants just so I can keep an eye on it here. Hopefully that does it. Okay. So yeah, just very quickly, thanks for all the help on the previous contract release. That went well. It went through on the weekend after some back and forth on timing, and it went through smoothly. So, you know, as Luke, as you have mentioned, I guess timing doesn't matter as much as just how much testing we've done. So it was well tested, went through testnet, and then that is this FIP1A, transferring of the domain, the paging pieces we put on some of the calls when too much data is returned. You weren't getting it all, so you needed the ability to page through some of that data. And then just some additional FIP3 and FIP4 calls as well. So looking at the October release though, and our goal is to get this into testnet in the next few days. We're doing some local, what we call DevNet testing. So similar where we put it up onto multiple nodes and do some testing locally today and tomorrow. So we might get it into testnet tomorrow. So I'll put out more, I'm writing up more details on what that looks like within the actual release on GitHub. And I'll put a link out to that and post that out to everyone. So that'll include this FIP9, which allows voting and proxying without a FIO address. I think some of that was driven from the BPs, if I'm not mistaken. We have a larger thing, which is the redesign of the Fee Computations. So we'll actually get that up and running. I know we've been doing the manual updates of the fees, right, with the MSIGs. This should, once this is in domain net, enable individual BPs to set their multipliers and ratios once again. And we were having performance problems with that in the past, and Ed has worked on that, and we'll dig into that and explain what's coming up and what will need to be done by the BPs to get that up and running here shortly. In addition, FIP7, which is burning of FIO address. So we are kind of working our way through that backlog of development that happened when we had to kind of do that Gemini release where we had the forking issue where when we were making updates to add new actions, it wasn't, we weren't able to do that without an update to the chain code. So now that that's passed through, we're able to push through some of this stuff. So that's what I'm calling the October release. I can post, once I finish talking, I'll post out the link to this roadmap. I think everyone should be able to have access to that who has access to the Atlassian or has a login in Atlassian. So it's readable by everyone. The next piece is, so that's a contract only update. So the MSIGs will be coming through for what I'm calling the November release. And I call it the October release though. We probably won't get this out by the end of the month, given the back and forth with testnet and then in the mainnet, but maybe by the first week of November, the October release will be out, but it's what we've been working on here in October. What I'm calling the November release is the follow-up release. So let's call that October release +1, probably more like a December, coming out in December, but this involves a chain code update. In addition, a non-forking, let me emphasize that, chain code update in addition to some contract updates as well. What's important about this one, it actually involves some table migrations for us. So we're starting to do some optimizations of some of the table structures to make lookups, and this is mainly centered around what we're calling this FIP1B, which is the ability to transfer a FIO address. So that's not as simple as it sounds. Casey's been working on that one. It involves a lot of performance updates to the ability to get FIO requests in an efficient manner for wallets, because we've been hit some, like we did some promotions where we'd had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of requests and they weren't coming back in a very efficient manner, or some were getting dropped. So we really needed to update the performance of some of those tables, and Casey did that by moving him to more vector lookups. So that's an important one, but what that does require is the creation of new tables and the migration of existing data into those new tables. So that'll be a first for this dev team on FIO here. So that's going to take a lot of testing, and it'll probably require multiple MSIGs to actually roll that out. So that'll be a larger, kind of more complex release in November. But again, it'll start with the rollout of the chain code. We'll have the BPs get updated on that, and then we'll start rolling out some of these MSIGs in all the testnet scenarios as well. Also, I know Adam threw out some of the Clio updates he's done, and some of you have reviewed that. Excuse me, that'll also make it into the November release as well. We're actually reviewing some of our transaction history strategy. And Luke, that's probably another thing. Maybe in our next BP meeting, we can discuss that, what that looks like, because we are in the process of upgrading to the EOSIO 2.x release versions. And that means what happens with V1 history, where do we want to go with history support? Because we've added a lot of custom code into the V1 history. So what happens when we move to state history or with the Hyperion solutions? And I think that's a great discussion for the BP community to figure out as well. But, and I don't need to go into all these because they're a ways out, but the ability to lock tokens and some other FIPS are included in this November release. So that's what I had. Ed, do you wanna, oh, and I have not been keeping my eye on the waiting room. Sorry, just one there. Okay. Ed, do you want to flesh out the fee piece of that and what to expect?
Absolutely. Thanks, Eric. So what was happening with the protocol was that we had originally intended for fee voting to be enabled and for fee votes to be computed automatically as part of the voting process and as part of the production of blocks. So what the idea was that every so often we would call the update votes automatically at system level. And this was designed into the FIO protocol on our trajectory for the mainnet launch. And it was never tested at a production scale. And you guys will all remember that as the first time we tried that, we had big problems. So we quickly disabled the update of the fees in the on block and in the voting calls. And we just kind of disabled all of the voting capability and all of the updating of votes with the knowledge that it was not performant and it would not meet the needs of the production system. So what we've done is we've, gone off and we have redesigned the fee voting. So what this introduces is one binary extension to the fees table, which is a dirty flag, basically. It's a votes pending flag that is added as a binary extension. The interesting thing about this binary extension, as we've discovered in our scaled testing at DevNet, is that when you use get table in order to see the contents of the fees table, this field will not show up in your get table results at all. It's absent from the results until you have performed an update of the records in the table. So each record in the table must be updated with a pending so that it can be seen in the get table. What this requires is that what we've learned is that block producers, at least one block producer, will have to vote for all of the fees in the FIO protocol, and then this will remove this idiosyncrasy. Does that make sense to you guys? Like, this was actually, one of my early soirees into doing binary extensions, and it's very interesting to see this nuance of behavior that is in the current versions of EOSIO that we're running. Have you guys seen this? No? But yeah, so it sounds like no one has run into it, and it's just very interesting when we were testing it at scale. So we've got this well documented, and it shouldn't be a problem at all. So aside from that, what we've done is we've abandoned the fee votes table in favor of a new table called Fee Votes 2. which will be used to record all of the fee votes. So the new design has a new table that has been added to the protocol. The old table has not been used, so we don't have any migration issues or anything like that. But we wanted to make the new design performant. The new design uses vectors of fee votes for each block producer. And so this permits a very performant design. We've been able to test this in our full-scale DevNet with up to, I think it's 200 voting producers, each voting for 75 fees, which is more than double what we have in the protocol today. And it still performs quite well. So it should perform well at scale and well into our future. And one of the things that this really provides, which excites me for the protocol, is that, whenever we have new block producers come into the protocol, we want those block producers to vote for the fees and state their intention. And this will be recorded on chain. And this is made capable by this new design change. So I guess that's the high level on this. And I can go into the affected endpoints and stuff like that, but I don't think that's the right for the forum right now. If you guys want more information, we sure can.
So that means everyone will have to revote their multipliers and ratios, right? Because you're not using the existing votes.
Yes. So the rollout of this will be, the requirement is that at least one block producer after rollout must vote for all of the fees. So one block producer must vote for all of the fees, and all block producers should reset their multiplier, and they should reset their, they should make their votes because they haven't been voting. So they should make their votes for the fees that they want to vote for, excuse me. So that is what will be required at rollout.
Right. And then now it's a manual call to compute the fees, and we'll be using a push transaction because it's in the contracts right now. Eventually we'll roll that out as a plugin level call as well, API call, but that's how you'll actually update calls to update the fees.
Right, correct? I guess, yeah, thank you, Eric. That is important. So, instead of anything being done automatically by the system, the block producers will have to call a utility call to update the fees. And it's just recommended that this be done, on a clock tick every so often, as the block producers would like to decide how often they would like to have it done.
Great.
Is there, just a qualifying question, as people are setting up their votes initially, is there like a go live threshold where the chain will start using these new calculated fees, or how does that work?
Yeah, thanks, Luke. That's a great question. So what happens is there's logic in the fee voting that will not update the fees until 15 of the 21 block producers have voted. So if 15 or more block producers vote for the fee, then the fee will be recomputed. And this is done on a fee by fee basis, this computation. So by fee, 15 votes required. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and it basically will, I assume, continue with whatever is the status quo today until that threshold is met. So if there's a fee today that is being set kind of the quote unquote old way, it'll stay that fee until there's at least 15 voting for something on this new system. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct, yes.
Cool. And I just want to just add some color to this. The reason this is so important is a very key feature of the FIO protocol. It's just kind of like, as a witness on Hive, for example, I have to keep my price feed up to date. And if I don't, people message me and be like, "Hey, dude, you haven't updated your price feed in the last X number of hours or worst case days." It's a critical, important part to our protocol. And I'll give it a concrete example. There's a wallet that's doing a just giveaway, and they've kind of done the actual economics for themselves based on a $2 an address price. And because we're short of that price right now, they're a bit frustrated because they're actually, according to them, they're running at a net loss right now because of their cost for KYC and different things they do to onboard their users. So they really want to see these prices updated as soon as possible. And ideally with this rollout, we can, as VPs, you guys can be keeping that price accurate constantly. Throughout the day, you could have your Oracle running that's just firing off, an updated price multiplier based on the changing price of the FIO token in US dollar terms. So we can hit that kind of manufactured retail suggested value. You know, there hasn't been much pushback to $2 an address. That's kind of where we're at right now. Obviously, that's an open discussion. But as we're kind of talking,
considering we can't get people to update a cell in a spreadsheet.
Well, that's yeah, and
we got 10
is,
on there right now since I last cleared them, and it's been like 5 days. And we've been willing to do the MSIGs for these, but people can't even be bothered to update this table. So I don't know. I'm a little concerned about people updating the fees.
It's a really good point, Patrick, and I hope everyone hears this. And I'll definitely be saying, you know, highlighting that as well. I think often server engineers are lazy and they like to automate everything. And so I think the big problem with that spreadsheet, it's a manual process and it just doesn't fit the mindset of it. Now, if they run a script and there's monitoring telling their script is down, they'll go fix that. But they want the script to automatically run, right? And that's how I know I am. Like if I had to update my fees on Hive, it would never get done if I had to do it manually. But I've got my script going, right? So I hear your concern. It's a valid concern. And it's really one we got a lot of fire up, you know, everybody's butts to get it done. But my hope is we could shift that conversation to, hey, how's your script that's automated, you know, according to this, you know, what you prefer for your own Oracle approach, and hold people accountable to that. Because that's just more feasible, right? That's what I'm hoping. But thank you for bringing that up. And anyone listening on this call, please, if you haven't been able to prioritize that, please know it's impacting real projects that the FIO protocol is trying to partner with and roll out. And it's really important to get those, you know, fees close as much as we can. So thank you, Patrick. Again, shout out to Aloha EOS. You guys have done a really phenomenal job owning the reporting tools for the fees on your website, and also you know, being a champion to get those MSIGs ready to go and updating the spreadsheets. Really, really appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Along with that rollout in November or sooner, we can actually do this sooner because we have the price oracle that Casey put together that does actually do lookups. We'll make sure that's updated and the code's out there. So if any VP wants to use that or pull in that code or write their own or whatever, but we'll have an example out there that does the pricing from various, I think it does an averaging. I can't remember totally, Casey, but yeah. That'll be
all right. Cool. Any other questions related to the pricing? If not, I'll jump in next. If you want to give me screen sharing, I think maybe I'm not an actual co-host. Maybe that's why. If I was a co-host, I'd be able to screen share. We were talking earlier about waiting room stuff.
Let me do this here. It might be my defaults too. Luke, can you share now?
Yep, I could share now. Excellent. All right. So what I'm going to do here, we'll spend a chunk of time on this. Stop me if you can't see the screen.
I got it.
Good. This here, hopefully you've all seen this. We've been updating this and thinking it through. I actually did kind of a little 10-minute video as well, talking through it. So it'll probably be kind of similar to some of the stuff I'm saying right now. And that's because, you know, some of this is pretty detailed and technical. And it's funny because I can remember back as a witness for Steam, when Steam had pushed out their resource credit system, it had all this math and it was all like confusing. And it was kind of like, wait, what? How do you expect us to understand all this if you want us to set these prices and things? And so I was kind of reliving that moment from the other side going, oh yeah, I can't just expect that, you know, the block producers are fully aware of all the discussions that have gone on into this model. So I really want to make sure we talked through again and had a lot of time to kind of answer any questions and make sure you understood what we're trying to accomplish. So again, the background here is there's incentives going to the block producers, incentives going to the wallets and exchanges. But there's no current way to demonstrate the value that's being added by the token holders and those customers who are paying fees to register addresses and domains. So this, in terms of a co-op model, a co-op meaning the customers are also those who get to participate in the benefit of the system that they're participating in. You know, that's the model we're going for. So the user pitch, I kind of try to clean this up a little bit. It's basically anyone who registers an address or a domain, you get a lifetime residual portion of the future income of the protocol. And the earlier you do that, the greater amount of the reward you'll get, the greater the share you'll get. And so if you register now, you'll have, you know, a percentage greater allocation than if you register later in the future. We're also exploring the idea that you could lock up tokens for a duration and receive an additional portion of the future income of the protocol. Now, something I just recently added to this document that I think is important for you all is that in addition to locking, we also want to make it a requirement that they have to vote for a block producer. That is an important contribution to the security of the network, and we want those tokens participating in that governance. So that's another criteria that we've added to this. This here is the big one. This is the one that I want to make sure we as a group of people have a chance to talk to. You know, if I was to just without context say, hey guys, I want to take 25% of your, you know, fees and give them to somebody else, like that would not go over well. I get that. However, when we're looking at the current economic models for the last 6 months, and we're looking at the amount of on-chain transactions, you know, it's not quite the level that we had modeled and we had hoped for. You know, we put in the block producer reserve pool in place, which is those 10 million tokens that are minting out. And our team looked into that. We've got about 8 million of those have been minted already, which means we only have, you know, a couple million more. And then that faucet essentially turns off. And that concerns me. I want to make sure that our block producers are well paid and well supported for their efforts. So when I look at this, you know, on the surface, again, it might be a little bit hard to swallow to be like, wait a minute, how come you're taking 25%? But I feel like 25% of a small number is not that interesting. You'd rather have a smaller percentage of a larger pool of funds than a larger percentage of not much at all. Like we could make this 100%, but if there's not enough on-chain activity and fees to support your activities, doesn't matter, right? We can make it, in the case of EOS, 1% if we're talking about the inflation, and as long as it's enough tokens, then that's fine, right? So we're trying to continually adjust these according to the activity that, you know, we're seeing on the chain to get into that place where everyone's going to be rewarded. And I feel like right now the current model we have just doesn't properly reward those who are adding value to the system as far as registering and paying fees, things of that nature, and also those who are deciding to hold the token today when it has less utility value as it may have in the future when there's more and more businesses, wallets, exchanges, payment gateways using FIO Protocol. So this is something, again, that I just wanted to really highlight for this group and talk it through, make sure there's a shared understanding of why we feel this is worth doing and why we feel it'll create a lot more value to the block producers in the long run. And this idea is that, and in addition, and this is an important part as well, we also want to allocate, and we're currently thinking about 20 million tokens. So this is double what we've done in the past as far as block producer reserves. And again, these are still, everything is still in discussion. We haven't even finalized the spec, let alone created a FIP, let alone, you know, put up some code for you guys to review and decide on. But ultimately, the thought here is in these early stages, it's more important to have consistent token income for those who secure the chain than it is to kind of speculate on what might be happening in the future. So this idea is we could refill this block producer reserves and then essentially appropriately burn foundation tokens to offset that, because this would be, again, these tokens are minted the way the code works. This would be a code change, and then we would, to keep it under the existing total number of tokens we agreed to with the community, that's how we would do this. So ultimately, the idea would be these block producer reserves that are running out pretty soon, we would be able to keep that going, so you don't wake up here in another couple weeks or months and find out like, hey, what happened to my pay? It's just down and there's not enough on-chain activity with the fees to support my infrastructure. That would be not ideal, right? So what we're looking at is saying, okay, yeah, we might be asking for a portion of these fees to be redistributed. But we think ultimately it shouldn't impact your infrastructure, because I think you agree with us that the long-term commitment of this chain is mass adoption. You know, we're looking for people from all over the world, the next billion non-crypto people to come in and get involved in crypto through FIO is our goal. And that's, you know, that's where this 60% is going to be much more interesting than, you know, 85% of the activities we have today. So that's kind of where we're going. And there's additional information here. I won't go and read all of this, but essentially kind of explains this idea of a FIOP point. It's kind of a internal accounting mechanism for how we'll keep track of this. You know, you could call it like a non-transferable token if you want to, but it's a token essentially that's attached to the actual FIO address or FIO domain. So if you do trade or sell or move that around, then the FIOPs that were associated to that would actually move with it. So you can kind of think of these NFTs, these addresses and domains will kind of have their own separate value based on how old they are. You know, how early did they commit to supporting the FIO protocol? And that's going to relate to kind of their share of the future fee income on the chain. And that we also have this mechanism here as well, so that if the foundation actually wants to, actually still give away certain FIO addresses for certain situations, we could make it so that there wouldn't be any fee ops for that, because you know that was a giveaway type situation. But as part of this whole change, we're really hoping again that the excitement within the community to be able to get this share of future revenue, share of future activity on chain, will create an opportunity where we may not need to be giving away free FIO addresses much at all. And that again creates more revenue on chain, more excitement for the users and things of that nature. We're also talking about like how long would this program last? You know, the first X number of blocks, which might be, you know, for example, 4 years or something like that. And then here's the actual kind of math, and those are into the math, thinking that through. We'd love to have you kind of dive into this and think it through as well. Here's some examples given, and then there is a full model as well that you may have seen. For some, this is a little bit overwhelming and confusing, and that's why I kind of try to have the video to kind of walk it through a little bit. But for others, you might be interested in kind of running some examples to say, okay, if so-and-so spends a certain amount of FIO, you know, what would it look like as far as their share of future fees going forward with these kind of assumptions? So if you want, you can make a copy of this and you could play with these numbers to kind of think through, okay, what would this actually look like in terms of revenue for the blockchain and a benefit to the individual user. So this spreadsheet is linked in there if you wanted to play around with that. And then in that same kind of vein related to the actual mathematical functions and the different examples, we're also working with some people to run some Monte Carlo simulations. So essentially we could simulate all these different possible scenarios. And it's actually kind of similar to how you have these bond, I forgot the exact term, Eric, help me out here, the bond staking curves or bond derivative curves. In the right term that David used earlier today?
Yield curves.
Yielding curves, thank you, Paulo. Yes, so the bond yielding curves, there are these kind of known curves that have been a part of the financial industry for quite some time. And we have some models that we can kind of play with that have kind of evolved over time. And we're going to be running a bunch of different simulations. So, okay, if the percentage was this, if the fees were this, you know, what would this all look like? And make sure that we've kind of thought through every black swan type scenario of some weird thing we hadn't considered that might throw off the tokenomics. And we're going to be able to start implementing and designing this prior to knowing all the answers, because ideally, as mentioned here in the bottom, you know, we want certain things that are going to be open to adjustment by the block producers. So that would mean if we get it wrong after we put it in production and we start seeing how the market and the kind of motivational incentives are being adjusted based on what we've deployed, and we feel like it's broken and we need to fix it, there's going to be a mechanism for the block producers to come together and do a multi-sig and change some of these if needed. And we'll make it clear as we launch this that, you know, it's not set in stone. It's not forever. You know, it's going to be something that may change over time as we best adapt to the needs of the whole FIO community. So that's kind of the overview. Again, you've got this type A for people who spend fees. You've got this type B for those who lock tokens. And in addition, are going to be participating by voting, either through proxy or they're doing direct voting. And then let's see, I think that covers most of it. This just jumps into some of the details of, from a technical perspective and performance-based perspective, you know, how often will we be distributing? How often will we be evaluating the FIOPs that are distributed to the individual accounts? You know, all this stuff is going to be worked out once we get further along in the design phase and actually start building out a spike to prototype it and figure out where it is. But I think that's mainly it. Again, I'd encourage you guys to jump in and add any comments in here. There's an important comment here about existing addresses. We do want to create a large incentive for those who have been supporting us this whole time, especially those that did domain purchases on the pre-sale and things of that nature. We just haven't worked out exactly what the right approach is for that. And again, this is why we're going to be doing the Monte Carlo testing to come up with different ideas and scenarios. And I'd like to include in that, if we were to reward early adopters this much, as if, they participated for this long, those are the types of things that we're going to be playing around with. But it is something that I want to consider. There are people that have been participating in this ecosystem prior to this existing, and I want to make sure that they get a nice reward for that as well. So before we jump right into questions, I want to open it up to Pavo, who's going to be starting working on design on this. Is there anything in addition to what I've said that you want to highlight here?
No, I think you kind of covered it at a high level. If there are any specific questions, maybe we open it up, and if there are questions, I'd be happy to jump in.
Fantastic. So yeah, let's open it up for questions. So first of all, my biggest concern is, do you guys agree with some of our assumptions here? Do you think lowering this percentage in an effort to create a lot more excitement by the users and also backfilling this block producer reserves for that stable income going forward, does this make sense?
So I really need to read it. I need some time to read it because it seems a pretty complex model. But for me, yes, we need something that stays, the users rewarded, that engages, because right now we are competing with, DeFi and whatever Ethereum is also going to stake, it's the world in we live in crypto. So yeah, and I believe in rewarding token holders and long-time token holders. So, and users. So yeah, I think that the one thing that I really like about FIO is that it's EOS.io, but with fees. Because we are seeing a lot of issues in other EOS.io chains, and we're having this discussion a few times. At least I got it with a few of the people that is already here in the call. And technology is amazing, but no fees is not sustainable. So, and every resource model that is being tested, I don't know, but I don't see it actually working. I believe in a model with fees. It doesn't have really expensive. It has to be, that sweet spot. And yeah, I totally support this.
Thank you, Joseph. Appreciate that.
Luke, can I just ask a quick question? The 20 million to top back up the reserves, do you have it modeled out how long that's expected to last?
Pablo, maybe you want to jump into that because we actually modeled out the original 10 million and I was under the impression that it had actually ran out last weekend. Thankfully it had not. You guys probably would have noticed if your fee, your collection of, and they ran some numbers this morning. And the reason why it hadn't run out is there was a period of time where it was only being added every 2 days instead of every day. There was also a period of time where a number of tokens were allocated to be claimed but weren't claimed, and that impacted the total number of tokens available for BP Pay as well. So if a block producer doesn't claim, then essentially those tokens go back into the pool, which means fewer tokens have to be minted from BP reserves. But yeah, Pablo, do you want to give some thoughts on that?
Yeah, so this is the 10 million has been initially allocated, and I apologize for the knocking here. People are working on my roof, but what initially was 10 million, and we currently have minted 8, so there's still 2 million left. And I anticipate that maybe it will take another 2 months, a month and a half to 2 months before they run out. And so you kind of go from March till January, so it's like 10 months that they had lasted. But keep in mind that that is greatly impacted by the activity and the fees being paid, right? So if the fees are that are being paid go up, then obviously fewer and fewer tokens are being minted, and that amount kind of lasts longer. So I would say that probably status quo is, assuming a slight growth, is probably 10 million can last a year potentially, right?
Yeah,
If there is a big spike in fees, then obviously it would last much longer. So 20 million, again, this is like just high level assumption, is potentially 2 years maybe.
Yeah, 18 months to 2 years, it looks like.
Sorry,
those kind of numbers.
Pavo or Luke, is this an additional 20, or it says up to moving from up to 10 to up to 20, or is it going to be now up to 30? Is that the idea, or which one?
No, we're not going to add 30. It would be 20 additional to the 10 that was already allocated that is almost spent. So there's only 2 left. My understanding of this would be, and again, this is all preliminary, so it's not like anything's been coded or anything's been even submitted in a FIP at this point. We may decide that 20 is too much, for example. There may be other uses of those tokens by the foundation that are better than this. But in a sense, you can think of this as a lockup, because the tokens get locked up, just making it available to the block producers regardless of activity on chain. You know, that's the way to think about it. So for example, ideally, this is what I'd love to have happen, is that FIO activity greatly increases, and there's a whole bunch of registered addresses and domains, millions of them, to the point where these tokens actually never get used, and they stay locked forever because we're above the threshold of at least 50,000 tokens a day via the normal activities. And this is why the co-op model we think is so important, because it incentivizes that activity. It incentivizes users to say, hey, it's not only worth me spending my $2 for an address, or maybe $40 for a domain, and start registering addresses. I actually want to go tell all my friends now, because every other person I get that signs up even 1 block after me, I get a share in their fees, because I'm now part of the pool of people that signed up before they did. And then they're going to feel the same way too. Get everybody else on board. It's this NFT that actually has an earn component to it, which is, I think, really interesting. So yeah, that's the way I would think about it. So it's kind of, it's a great question, Sharif. It could last for 2 years, or it could last much longer. But it's an idea that we want to create this understanding that if you're a FIO block producer, you're going to be taken care of by the chain, regardless of the ebbs and flows of the activity on chain.
Yeah, I was actually asking it from a community point of view more so than from the BP as to what we're going to get paid. It's just, to me, it just needs to be believable and sustainable for a long enough period of time for us to build that traction.
Yeah. Yep. And it's a tricky thing to do. We've not modified the tokenomics in any way since launch, and it's been, so we're here 6 months in, and we certainly don't want to create an expectation with token holders or participants in the network or BPs or anyone else who got incentive rewards, or anybody holding the token, that this is something that could just change willy-nilly, right? Obviously, modifying your tokenomics is a very serious thing. No one's going to come out tomorrow and say, hey, there's going to be more than 21 million Bitcoin. It's just not going to happen. And so we take these things very seriously, and this is why this is all very preliminary. We're going to talk it all the way through. And in terms of this particular change, it's kind of just moving from one bucket to another, right? We're not changing the number of tokens in existence. And also, I should also mention, as part of this, there's a good, I forgot the exact number, don't have it in front of me, but it's more than 10. There's a good number of millions of tokens that were set aside for FIO member incentives that will never be minted, never be claimed. Basically, they're locked forever as of the October 20 deadline. And there's been discussion at some point of like, well, maybe we could reallocate those tokens. And I'm currently of the opinion that, that was what we agreed to, that those tokens would be locked forever. So they may be locked forever. And so we may end up having a less than 1 billion token allocation as far as the total available tokens in circulation. And this is something that, I think people that are participating in the network might appreciate, but these are, again, things that we can discuss. It's all open to discussion. Great question. Any other questions? Don't everybody speak at once. I think my hope is just to get a feel for the direction we're heading with this. Does this feel right? And so far, it sounds like there's an understanding of, yes, you need to look into it in more detail. You got to read up on it some more, get more familiar with it. But in a general sense, this idea of changing the proposed fee allocation to include the end user is something that makes sense. That's what I'm hoping to come away with this call, is an understanding of, does that make sense to our community, our block producers?
Yeah, generally, I think it makes sense.
Yeah. But I also think it makes sense in general, yes, but we need to study it a little bit more.
Yeah, I don't get all the tokenomics of all of it, but yes, it makes general sense.
Excellent. Good to hear that. And I want to, and that's why I kind of recorded this video, which again is probably going to just be the same kind of stuff we just discussed. So I'm not sure how much more value you get out of it. But I would, you know, I know tokenomics is a really difficult thing. I've been involved in this space for 7.5 years. I've been a consultant for a number of those years. And tokenomics is the magic sauce, right? There's no perfect tokenomic model I've ever seen, right? So hopefully what we could do, like I talked about those Monte Carlo simulations, hopefully we'll continue to evaluate and bring data to this discussion for you guys to be able to better understand where we're going with some of these kind of, you know, at some point you pick a number out of the hat and say, okay, does this work? But if there's anything we can do to help, even in addition to that, to clarify what you would need to feel confident about this, please let us know. You know, this is what we want to be able to do as a foundation, is provide feedback on ideas like this that bubble up and become part of the conversation. Also, I wanted to highlight too, just while we're talking about it, Eric also linked off to 2 other proposals that are being discussed, and I just wanted to highlight those real quick. One is related to DeFi and how you can potentially interact with DeFi using the FIO protocol from just a generic wallet. So literally you could just like send to, you know, stake at Uniswap, for example, and there'd be an oracle that could handle all the complex DeFi interactions, such as, you know, staking and unstaking and, you know, whatever interaction you might have there, lending, borrowing, whatever it might be. And then you could, when you're ready to get your tokens out of that DeFi platform, you could initiate it, for example, with a FIO request and say, okay, I'd like to withdraw from the liquidity pool, for example. You know, these are the type of things where a normal wallet that doesn't have full authenticator or signing capabilities might be able to interact with DeFi. And as we're seeing more and more contract chains, you know, Binance Smart Chain is really pushing hard to get into the DeFi space. You know, there's whispers of Cardano doing different DeFi things of that nature. It's going to be harder and harder for most wallets to be able to interact with those complicated contracts. And we might be able to have a solution with FIO Protocol with an oracle in between, or potentially the DeFi contracts themselves being able to become FIO aware to a degree where they can participate at a higher level. So that's a really cool write-up that we'd actually love for your feedback on, as well as the enabling FIO token and domain NFT wrapping. That's another write-up we'd love for you guys to take a look at. Really big shout out to Michael Yates of the EOStack crew, and also my EOS USA Michael as well. He's been phenomenal to help us evaluate the different opportunities we have, and others as well. I know you've participated in providing feedback and evaluating it. So the idea being that we looked at Chainlink, we looked at Liquid Apps, we looked at Band, I think I'm saying that right, Band. We looked at a number of different solutions, and it looks like the one that Michael Yates has been doing with Alienware, it seems to be, or Alien World seems to be the one that we're going to explore in more detail and spec out. But always open to your input and feedback on those as well. That would be fantastic.
Yeah, especially I'll add to that, especially that the path that we're going right now is we are likely going to be looking for block producer volunteers to be kind of the oracles on this network to basically run that software that will monitor Ethereum and monitor FIO. So I encourage you to take a look at this and chime in.
Yes, thank you. That's a really good point, Pablo. And I think we've kind of already got a loose commitment from both the Michaels as far as, you know, their ability to participate in this. We'd be happy to have others as well. We kind of explored at one point whether we just wanted to make this standard and have all the BPs participate, but it kind of didn't make sense economically or even just performance-wise to have so many verifications and validations of this. It's pretty straightforward. It's like, yeah, it happened on chain, and I'm putting my reputation online to say it happened on chain, and that's pretty much it. So we're probably going to start out small with just a handful to get this going. But very excited about that. Also, just had a conversation earlier today with David, and the idea of verified FIO IDs. It's funny, our top 4 keep coming up. So I think we picked a good top 4. There's another concept of a meta solution for all of FIO. For a lot of naming wallet solutions. But the idea of FIO IDs, if you saw verified FIO addresses, if you saw Unstoppable, for example, had an integration with Twitter so you can verify your Unstoppable domain. I've got some other conversations going on that relate to verifiable IDs. So that's another conversation that we will be fleshing out in more detail as well. So this is just kind of giving you all an overview of what we're working on. A lot of cool activities going on. You can always hit that Jira board for initiatives. Highly encourage you all as well to include your initiatives. I'm excited to hear from Adam. He said he's got some cool ideas he's been baking on and thinking about and wants to put in the board. So definitely, if you guys have ideas for FIO, things that you think it might be interesting for FIO to do, please go to the worker proposal section and create an initiative. It'd be phenomenal. And then two, with that, if it's something that makes sense for the foundation to support financially, this project might be something we could support in addition to, just your services as a block producer. So I think that's pretty much it for me. We got another 11 minutes. Any other topics of discussion or open conversation we want to have? All right. If not, I guess we'll finish a little bit early. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Excellent. Fantastic. Thank you guys so much again. Really appreciate your time. And please get on those multi-sigs, update the spreadsheet to get those fees updated. Let's get that done right away. And then we can get this, hopefully get this code roll out later in the month or next month to get this much, much easier for you all. Really, really appreciate that. And lots of exciting stuff going on. Like I said, we got a press release that's being worked on to talk about all the new integration partners we have now. If you haven't checked out Change Now, I would encourage you to do that. It's a pretty awesome experience that you're enabling to happen. Someone can exchange crypto without ever seeing a public address. It's a really cool experience. So check that out. And if you have any other questions, let us know. Sound good?
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, everyone.
Okay.
Perfect. Thanks.
Good going.
No.
Bye-bye.
Gracias. Hasta luego. Adiós.